mu lukungaana lwaffe olunaku olwaleero tuvudde mu kitongole ekya National Building Review Board, ekitongole ekya gavumenti ekyateekebwawo okulondoola omutindo gw'ebizimbe mu Uganda yonna. Era ng'omulimu guno tuze tugukola okuva mu 2018 okutuuka olunaku olwaleero, era nga bingi bye tukoze omuli okuteeka enkola zaffe ez'ebyokuzimba ku mutimbagano, era ng'omutimbagano gwaffe twaguyita Building Industry Management System. Tulondodde omutindo gw'ebizimbe, tukoze okunoonyereza ku kiki ekiviirako ebizimbe okugwa, era alipoota zaffe nnyingi nnyo tuzibawadde mu bannamawulire ne muzituusa ku bannayuganda. Naye newankubadde tukoze ebintu bingi nnyo, etteeka lyaffe eryatuteekesa mu nkola erya Building Control Act twakizuula nti lirimu ebirumira, era ne tutandika kaweefube w'okulaba nga tulikolamu ennongoosereza nga tuyambibwako Parliament, era tuli basanyufu okubategeeza nti etteeka lino lyayisibwa Parliament, omukulembeze w'eggwanga n'alisaako omukono, ate ne liteekebwa mu kiwandiiko ky'eggwanga ekitongole oba Gazette, era nga kati lyafuuka etteeka. Nja kubayisizaamu ebimu ku bikulu ebiri mu tteeka lino. Ekisooka, abatuula ku lukiiko olwa National Building Review Board tubadde ne ba members 16 nga be batuula ku lukiiko luno olwa National Building Review Board. Naye mu tteeka eppya bammemba bano bakendeezeddwa, kati bajja kuba bammemba 9 bokka. Mu tteeka lyaffe eppya era emirimu gy'ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board gigaziziddwa. Kati ekitongole kirina obuvunaanyizibwa obw'okuwulira okwemulugunya okuva eri omuntu ssekinnoomu, okuva eri akakiiko akavunaanyizibwa ku by'okuzimba. Mu tteeka lyaffe buli kibuga, municipality ne district birina okubeera n'obukiiko obuvunaanyizibwa ku by'okuzimba. Okuwuliriza okwemulugunya okuva eri omuntu ayambako akakiiko kano okukola emirimu gyako oba Building Control Officer. So singa baba balina okwemulugunya ku nsonga ezikwatagana ku by'okuzimba, kati balina eddembe okujja eri ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board ne beekubira enduulu. Ensonga ey'okubiri mu nnongoosereza zino ekwatagana ku buyinza obw'ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board. Obuyinza bwaffe nabwo bwongeddwamu amaanyi, nga kati ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board kisobola era kirina obuyinza okuyimiriza ekizimbe, okulagira abantu okwamuka ekizimbe, senga ekitongole kino kiwabula akakiiko akavunaanyizibwa ku by'okuzimba nti ekizimbe kino kya bulabe, akakiiko ne katabaako kye kakola. Senga ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board kifuna okwemulugunya ne kitegeeza akakiiko, tugeze ak'ekira oba Wakiso, nti ekizimbe kino kya bulabe eri bannayuganda, akakiiko ne katabaako kye kakola, kati ekitongole kirina obuvunaanyizibwa okugenda mu kizimbe ekyo okukiyimiriza senga kiba kizimbibwa, oba okulagira abakirimu bakiveemu okusobola okutaasa obulamu bwabwe. Akakiiko era kaweereddwa obuvunaanyizibwa obw'ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board okuteekawo ebibonerezo ebyabuliwo oba express penalties. Tugeze singa omuntu azimba nga talina permit oba olukusa, aba talulina, tekyetaagisa ate kusooka genda mu kkooti. Kibanga omusirikale bw'akusanga ku kkubo ng'ovuga emmotoka nga tolina permit oba togirina, awo wennyini waakuweera ekibonerezo. So naffe ng'ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board kati tulina obuyinza obuwa ebibonerezo ebyambagirawo, naye ebibonerezo bino bijja kutandika okukola oluvannyuma lw'okukola ebiragiro ebisisa mu nkola etteeka erya Building Control Act oba Building Control Regulations, era ng'ekitongole tugenda mu maaso n'okukola ebiragiro ebyo. Ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board era kiweereddwa obuyinza okugenda ku ttaka ly'omuntu, okuyingira ekizimbe oba okugenda we bazimba wonna senga ekitongole kifunayo ensonga yonna ekitwala ku kizimbe ekyo. So kati tulina obuyinza gye buvuddeko, tubadde tuziyizibwa okugenda mu bizimbe ebimu, naye kati obuyinza tubulina. Tulina n'obuyinza kati obutwala ensonga zaffe eri poliisi oba okwemulugunya kwonna eri poliisi ku nsonga ezikwatagana ku bizimbe. Tuwereddwa n'obuyinza obulala obuwandiikira ebitongole ebitwala abakugu omuli ba engineers, omuli ba architects, omuli ba surveyors senga wabaawo ensonga ezikwatagana ku neeyisa y'abantu abo. Ennongosereza endala eteereddwa mu tteeka lino ekwatagana ku kakiiko akavunaanyizibwa ku by'okuzimba. Nga bwe mbategeezezza buli kibuga, buli municipality ne districts zirina okubeera n'obukiiko obuvunaanyizibwa ku by'okuzimba. Kati mu tteeka lye tubadde nalyo akakiiko kabadde katuulako abantu 11 naye bano bakendeezeddwa kati akakiiko kagenda kutuulako abantu 5. Gye buvuddeko akakiiko kano kabadde kakulirwa munnabyabufuzi kati akakiiko kalina kukulirwa bakugu. Waliwo n'ensonga endala ekwatagana ku buyinza obw'akakiiko kano aka building committee era nga akakiiko obuyinza bwako bwongeddwamu amaanyi. Kati akakiiko kalina obuyinza okulagira ekizimbe kimenyebwe oba ekizimbe abantu bakiveemu singa ekizimbe ekyo kizuulibwa nti kya bulabe. Naye ebyo byonna bijja kuteekebwa mu biragiro ebinasisa mu nkola etteeka lino erya Building Control Act. Ensonga endala enkulu mu tteeka lino ekwatagana ku bibonerezo ebyenjawulo ebiri mu tteeka lino nga nabyo byongeddwamu omuzinzi. Ekisooka, singa omuntu asangibwa nga azimba nga talina lukusa mu Uganda yonna, oba oli mu kibuga oba oli mu kyalo oba oliwa, wozimba wonna olina okuba nga olina olukusa oba building permit. Singa kizuulibwa nti tolina lukusa ng'ozimba, kati mu tteeka lye tubadde nalyo obadde otanzibwa engassi yakakadde kamu oba okusibwa emyaka 2 oba okola ebibonerezo byombi. Naye kati mu tteeka eppya omuntu anaasangibwa nga azimba nga talina lukusa ajja kutanzibwanga siringisa emitwalo 4 buli square meter gy'anaazimba oba enaasangibwa nga ezimbiddwa nga talina lukusa. Ndowooza kitegerekese. Ekyokubiri, singa omuntu anaasangibwa nga azimba ng'olukusa olwamuweebwa lwaggwaako, etteeka lye tubadde nalyo omuntu abadde asasula emitwalo 5 oba okusibwa emyezi 13 oba okukola ebibonerezo byombi. Kati mu nnongosereza ze tukoze omuntu asangibwa nga azimba nga pamiti eyamuweebwa yaggwaako ajja kutanzibwanga siringisa emitwalo 4 oba currency points 2 ez'ekizimbe kinaasangibwa nga akizimbye ng'olukusa lwaggwaako. Ekyokusatu kiri ku kuzimbisa enkola ezaawerebwa. Nga Executive Secretary bw'abannyonnyodde, waliwo enkola eyali ezze wano mu Uganda emanyiddwa nga STC. Enkola eyo yawerebwa. Naye waliwo bannayuganda mu lukwesikwesi ababadde bakyagenda mu maaso n'okugizimbisa. Singa kati onaazuulibwa ng'ozimbisa enkola eyo oba endala yonna etakkirizibwa mu mateeka, ojja kutanzibwanga engassi ya mitwalo 10 ey'ekizimbe ky'onaaba ozimbye nga tolina lukusa. Buli square meter gy'onaaba ozimbye nga tolina lukusa mitwalo 10. So okufuna ekizimbe ky'ozimbye obunene bwakyo buli square meter ng'ogikubisamu emitwalo 10 z'ensimbi zojja okutanzibwa. Tubadde n'obuzibu obulala oba obubenje oba ebizimbe ebigwa naye nga oluusi tukalubirizibwa okuvunaana abantu. Naye kati mu nnongosereza ze tukoze, senga onaazuulibwa nti waviiriddeko ekizimbe okugwa, mu tteeka lye tubadde nalyo obadde otanzibwanga siringisa obukadde 5 mu emitwalo 60 oba okusibwa emyaka 12. Kati ekibonerezo kino kyongezeddwa era nga kati ojja kusasulanga siringisa obukadde 10 oba okusibwa emyaka 12 oba okukola ebibonerezo byombi. Ng'ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board kiki tukola kati oluvannyuma lw'etteeka lino okutandika okukola? Twabaka nadda ne kaweefube okukola ebiragiro ebisisa mu nkola etteeka lino erya Building Control Amendment Act. Era tubasuubiza nti essaawa yonna ebiragiro bino tujja bimaliriza bisibweko omukono minisita waffe avunaanyizibwa ku sekita yaffe neya works and transport olwo bitandike nabyo okukola. So tusaba bannayuganda mukitegeere nti etteeka lino terizze kubalemesa kuzimba, wabula lizze okulaba nti betuzimba bituukana n'omutindo okutaasa obulamu bwa bannayuganda wamu n'ebintu byabwe. Mwebale nnyo okumpuliriza.
Mukunzi wa obudde bulabika nga buggwawo naye
Executive Secretary we yabannyonnyodde nti Uganda bukyebaawo tubadde n'amateeka era ng'amateeka galambika buli muntu engeri gy'alina okuzimbamu. So amateeka gabaddewo naye era tumanyi nti waliwo bannayuganda abadde bazimba nga tebalina lukusa. Tubasaba bw'oba wazimba ekizimbe nga tolina permit oba osula mu kizimbe nga tolina occupation permit, funa omukugu addemu yeekenneenye ekizimbe kyo akuwe drawings entuufu oswale mu kakiiko akavunaanyizibwa ku by'okuzimba mu kifo gy'oli kaziddemu kazeekenneenye kajja kukuwa olukusa olabe nga naawe otuukana n'etteeka nga bwe ligamba. Weewale ebinaddirira ti ate ekizimbe kyange akakiiko kazze ne kakiteeka wansi. Yes, Ramson.
ensonga ya abantu abalina obuyiiya mu kuzimba okubanga it has to be first approved.
Weebale nnyo weebalire ddala. Ng'ekitongole ekya National Building Review Board, obuvunaanyizibwa bwaffe si bwa kuziyiza abo abalina obuyiiya bwe bakola mu sekita yaffe y'ebyokuzimba, naye obwaffe bwakulaba nti bye bayiiya bituukana n'omutindo era bijja mu nkola yaffe wano ey'Abannayuganda. Tulina bannaffe abaleeta enkola ya STC naye bwe twakola okunoonyereza twamala emyaka 2 nga tukola okunoonyereza ku nzimba eno, twakizuula nti bali baakoppa bukopi kye baakoppa eri ate ne kye baakoppa ne batakikoppa bulungi okukireeta okukikozesa mu nkola eyaffe wano bannayuganda. So ng'ekitongole tusaba nti oli bw'aba ayina enzimba empya gy'ayina agireete, tujja muwa platform agidemonstrating, tugikubemu tooki tulabe oba etuukana n'omutindo. Bw'eba etuukana n'omutindo etteeka litulagira okuadvisinga minisita ku nkola eyo, era bwe tulaba nti etuukana n'omutindo tujja kugiyisa. Bw'eba tetuukana na mutindo era nga bwe twakola ku STC tujja kuadvisinga minisita era alambike ti enkola eyo tetuukana na mutindo. So bottom line is ogwaffe si gwa kutangira bannayuganda kuyiiya. Bannayuganda bayiiye naye bwe bayiiya birina okuba nga bituukana n'omutindo.
Akasembayo okuva ewa Shakulu tumaliriza.
Tubaddemu enforcement officer ng'omuntu oba omuntu sekinoomu nga ziwa talina buyinza buwa muntu yenna lukusa lwa kuzimba oba okusula mu kizimbe. Olukusa olwo lukuweebwa akakiiko akavunaanyizibwa ku by'okuzimba oba building committee. So bw'obaawo abadde akikola yonna gy'obadde bw'oba yakikolera yamenya mateeka, naawe wamenya mateeka. So kikyamu akakiiko akavunaanyizibwa ku by'okuzimba ke kalina obuyinza. Ne naffe nga National Building Review Board tetulina buyinza bugaba lukusa. Akakiiko akavunaanyizibwa ku by'okuzimba ke kalina obuyinza okwo. So si muntu sekinoomu.
Kale tuwanzanyizibwa Leza Shakulu oliwaddemu okuwazibwa adde.
So,
colleagues, good morning.
good morning.
Good morning to you all.
Chugani.
With us unpack the new amendment, and basically today we are going to indeed to welcome Mr. Zwahabat, former soldier, to come and introduce the delegation which is here, and also invite.
This is on. Of course, our hosts this morning, thank you. We've already been introduced from the National Building Review Board. My colleagues here head different units within the National Building Review Board, but that's not the reason we are here. The reason we are here today is to inform the public of the amendments and reforms that are in place beginning March 19th, 2026, when the amendment was gazetted and commenced. As a way of background, Uganda's building and construction sector has been growing over the years. It has really experienced rapid growth. I think all of us can testify to that. This has been driven by urbanization, population increase, and infrastructure development. While this growth has contributed significantly to economic development, it has also been accompanied by persistent challenges, including non-compliance with building standards, use of unapproved construction methods and materials, inadequate supervision, and incidents. All of us, especially in the press, we've known of incidents of building collapses that have claimed life and property. In response to this, Parliament enacted the Building Control Act Cap 136, which provided for regulation of the building operations, standards, and maintenance of materials, of buildings. The Act, which consolidated and harmonized laws relating to building construction and standards aimed at promoting safety, sustainability, and professionalism within the sector. This Act also established the National Building Review Board as an agency under the Ministry of Works and Transport with a mandate to oversee the building control in Uganda. Since its establishment, we've done so many things, and I want to particularly thank you as members of the Fourth Estate that you have walked this journey with us. You have taken our call to the public. We have done so many things with you. Where we have had accidents, we've been there at accident scenes with you. We have investigated these accidents. We have released the outcomes of these accidents. At times, these investigations are not necessarily to only prosecute, but they also inform us of what we need to do going forward. In the same period since our establishment, we have put in place a number of regulations, the building control regulations, the fees regulations, and the appeal procedures. This, I think we can all testify, have caused a change in this environment. Previously, whenever it was rainy season, we at the National Building Review Board would not sleep. We expected an accident every day. Whenever it's rainy season, that was our expectation, that we have a building-related accident. People are going to lose lives, people are going to lose properties. But today we can tell you, since beginning of this year, we have not had a single building-related accident. That means the interventions are actually working. However, despite those milestones, we still have challenges in the sector. And these challenges have led to the Building Control Amendment Act of 2026. So today we want to unpack what are the major changes that the Act brings in. Number one is the membership of the National Building Review Board. The numbers have reduced from 16 to 9. This is basically to ease governance, for effective governance, and secondly, to reduce costs. The 9 members are representatives from the Ministry responsible for Works, Ministry responsible for Gender, Ministry responsible for Lands, Ministry responsible for Local Government, as well as a representative of the Attorney General. Then we have 4 representatives from the professional bodies. These are engineers, architects, surveyors, and fiscal planners. The second amendment is to do with the functions of the National Building Review Board. These have been expanded. Previously, we were only allowed to hear and determine complaints from people who had something to do with a building operation. and a building operation was defined. This was an ongoing activity. So if a member of the public, the building committee, or the building control officer had a complaint that did not relate to that, but it was a complaint about a building, this was not taken care of. This has now been addressed. Number two, we have been given the role to develop capacity of all stakeholders in relation to buildings and building operations in Uganda. And with the functions, they have now introduced powers of the board. One is to issue stop and evacuation orders. These are only issued after the building committees have failed to do their job. So we are at second level. We are not the first people to do this. So we would expect that all the building committees that are in charge of the various jurisdictions are actually doing their work and doing it right, so that these will not stifle what we have to do. Imagine being able to issue stop orders and evacuation orders throughout Uganda while seated at Lumumba Avenue. That would be a hell of a task. Two, there are powers to issue express penalties for certain offenses as may be prescribed by the minister responsible for works through regulations. Three, there is power to enter onto any land where a building operation is being undertaken. Four, there is power to guide building committees on procedural matters. Five, we can make complaints to the Uganda Police for investigation. And six, refer complaints concerning professionals to their regulatory bodies. On every project, there are professionals, architects, surveyors, and engineers. Should we identify an architect, a surveyor, or an engineer that requires disciplinary action, we will refer this to their regulatory bodies. The next key set of amendments are relating to the building committees. The first being that the number of building committee members have been reduced from 11 to 5. In addition, we have introduced the chairperson and secretary. These have clearly been named, the chairperson being the officer responsible for engineering in the local government, and the secretary being the officer responsible for physical planning. Also, the new membership only consists of technical persons. No politicians are in the committee. Further, in order to enhance the supervisory role at the local government, the accounting officers have been removed from the committees, and their role is basically now to appoint the committee and also to oversee what the committee does within that jurisdiction. So, and finally, the building committees have been mandated to now report to the National Building Review Board every quarter on all the activities that they are undertaking. With that are also functions of the building committees. The building committees have been given expanded powers, and they will be able to, these powers are actually supposed to support them in enforcement of the Building Control Act, because enforcement of the Act within their jurisdictions is actually their mandate. And one of the powers that they have been given is a power to demolish buildings that don't conform with the Building Control Act. So if the building committee deems that a particular operation or a particular building does not comply, does not conform with the Building Control Act, then it has been given powers to demolish that building. However, the process of demolition is going to be prescribed in regulations. So I want to curb the fears that someone will walk to your building, decide to take it down and takes it down. No. This shall be defined and described in regulations. The next set of amendments are to do with building permit issuance. Now, when you apply for a building permit today, the building committee may take a decision to approve, it may reject, or it may defer. So deferral had not been well articulated, and now this has been done. If your application is deferred, you have exactly 12 months within which to provide all the data, all the additional information that the building committee requires to take an alternative decision. And if you complied with 12 months, then you don't have to pay extra. But should you come after 12 months, then you'll have to pay the building committee to do this afresh. Also, we have, the law has introduced procedures of how you extend your building permit. If you have a building permit by law, you're supposed to start construction within 12 months and end within 60 months. So should you not comply with that for one reason or another, very many reasons may lead to that. What do? That has now been prescribed. The next set of amendments is to do with complaints. We at the NBRB have been receiving complaints countrywide. From every part of this country, we've been receiving complaints. However, this has now been staggered. The first point of call for all building-related complaints shall be the respective accounting officer. The accounting officer at the district, who is the COW, or the town clerk at the city, or the municipality. That is your first point where Ugandans should complain. Are really wide-ranging. At times, you have made an application to the building committee for permission, and the law says they should get back to you within 30 days, but they haven't. The first point of call should be the respective accounting officer, whose role there will be to order the building committee to take that decision. However, if after the respective accounting officer has issued these instructions, the building committee still does not act, then you are free to come to the National Building Review Board. We also have appeals. There is also an amendment to the appeals. Now you cannot appeal straight to the NBRB. If, as I've explained, if the building committee has not taken a decision, start with the accounting officer. When he fails, he or she fails, that's when you come to the National Building Review Board. The amendment has also caused a mandatory requirement for compliance, for application of the National Building Code. So going forward, everybody doing a design, everybody doing a construction, everyone doing a review of these designs, doing review of your construction, must do it in compliance with the National Building Code, so that we have one marking guide. Not, I did my design in conformity with the Euro Code, and then me at the building committee who is reviewing it, I am reviewing it in conformity with the National Building Code. So where the two contradict, what should carry the day? That's why now compliance and application of the National Building Code has been made mandatory. The next set of amendments is to do with unconventional methods, technologies, and materials in building operations. I want to take us back to one of the methods that the Honorable Minister of Works and Transport prohibited, and that's what was termed the steel, timber, concrete composite method. At that point, the law allowed that it is only prohibited. So it had to be implemented. Then we study it, know that it is unsafe, then we stop. Now that was working like post-mortem. something has already failed, then you stop it. Today we are still having challenges to look up all those buildings that had used that method, do studies on them, and see what can be done to salvage them. Now, to enable Ugandans innovate, the process has now been changed. When you have your innovation, bring it forward, we study it, and we'll advise the minister to allow it in Uganda before it becomes a problem to our nation. Amendment that has been brought in place. The next is to do with liability for causing accidents in buildings or on building construction sites. The law previously only penalized you for causing accidents on a building construction site. So if it's not a site, and for one reason or another, I am driving along the road and knocked down your house, caused an accident that killed people or not, that was not part of the law. Now this is different. It takes care of all circumstances. Increment, the next is the increment for various offenses. And I want us to pay attention to this because it may catch up with so many of us. Previously, for constructing without a building permit, you paid 50 currency points, which was 1 million, or 2 years imprisonment. Today, it is 2 currency points per square meter. An average residential building might be about 100 square meters. So if you constructed 100 square meters of building without permission, 100 square meters times 2 currency points, which is 40,000, would take you at 4 million shillings. And remember, one of the other amendments is that this is now going to be issued as express penalty. So let's be clear on that. 2, there is also building after expiry of the permit. I said we have introduced procedures for extension of this permit. So if you are building without, then you will also pay 2 currency points per square meter. The next is using prohibited methods. This has been increased from 48 currency points or 2 years imprisonment or both to 5 currency points per square meter. So if you're using a method, for example, what the minister prohibited, that is steel, timber, concrete, composite. If you're using that method, for every square meter you have built with that method, you shall be liable to 100,000 shillings per square meter. And many Ugandans that have used that method are building high-rise buildings. So you can figure out how many square meters we are talking about. And then finally, the liability for causing accidents has also been increased from 288 currency points to 500 currency points. So those are the provisions of the law. Those are the major amendments that are in the law. So what are the next steps? Most of these requirements need to be operationalized through regulations, and the next steps shall be development of those regulations. We'll have regulations for approval of the unconventional building methods, technologies and materials, express penalties. We'll also have regulations for complaints resolution. We'll have regulations for demolitions. Regulations that guide the building committee on how and when they order a demolition. So finally, what are we saying? We are telling Ugandans that these reforms are intended to promote safety, safer and accountability, order and accountability in Uganda's building sector. All developers, contractors, professionals, and the general public are urged to comply with the law and adhere to the approved building standards and procedures. And for further information, don't hesitate to reach us on our known platforms. You can reach us on email. You can also reach us on our toll-free number. Our email address is info@nbrb.go.ug, and our toll-free line is 0800-220-746. Or you can also seek the same information from the respective local authorities, God and my country. Thank you. These guys will take questions. This is what you
slow, especially in the context that most of these. Joseph, working with Uganda Catholic Television. My question is, what is the plight of
interest? Because we all left a building to a building this morning. Not so. We got out of a building that was our house and then to a building that is our office. That's how important buildings are. I'll start with Kato. Do you work in silos? Why would KCCA issue permission contrary to the law? That's a good question. And first of all, what the law is trying to introduce right now is that other power, that if these people have done something wrong, then what? So, in short, the law is addressing your question, that if there is anything that has been done at the respective local governments, not necessarily KCCA, any local government, because as you're looking at KCCA, there are people who are looking at my village somewhere else, and they are thinking that the decisions taken there do not conform to the law. So if that has been done, then there is an added layer that yes, the National Building Review Board has now been given powers to take action. Previously, we didn't have those powers. So I must say we are in the same direction. Mwanga talked about, is STC really bad? Now, Mwanga, one thing we have tried to introduce at the NBRB is science-driven decision-making. We do not take decisions based on popularity, but it should be scientifically proven. So as we are saying that this method works out there, our studies showed different. That what is working out there is not what is in Uganda. It is totally different. There are two different methods. Why is it so? That if we had to comply with everything that is happening out there, it would be more expensive for Ugandans. So what they tend to do is to compromise on certain things and then arrive at what we are calling the STC. However, what we advised the Honorable Minister to prohibit was what is called STC as it is in Uganda. But the use of steel, the use of timber, the use of concrete can still be done by the engineers provided they have designed appropriately. So what is banned is this photocopy of what is being used elsewhere. I hope that clarifies. This is a duplicate of what it should be. So we are saying leave the duplicate, bring it back to professionals, let professionals do the right thing. Joseph, what's the plight of the buildings that are non-compliant? That is going to be exhaustively dealt with in regulations. Procedures are going to be put in place for them to comply. That question is actually related to David's question that the law does not work retrospectively. While that might be true, but there is no time in the history of this country that approval was not required. Approval has always been required. That has always been the standard. You needed approval, you needed an occupation permit. Do you have it? In the previous dispensation, did you have it? That is where we are, what we are doing. So what the law is trying to do is to improve the enforcement mechanism. Previously, it was a requirement. People didn't do it. I can survey here how many people have an occupation permit. There might be 2 out of the number here. But it has been a requirement in the law. So when we come to say, show it to us, we are not introducing it. It has always been there. We are only giving the enforcers the powers to enforce. That's what it is. So it has always been a requirement in the law, but recognizing that there's going to be a regulation that clearly stipulates how those buildings should be regularized. How do we make them to conform? And the problem we have in the sector is that we only look at it as a problem when a building goes down. But this building has so many things that it does to your health. It has so many things that it creates, and it slowly affects the way we live our lives. But we don't see those effects until the building goes down. So we want to curb it at the beginning. The person who asked this question, unfortunately, I think I didn't. Mayanja also talked about, since 1990, there have been accidents. Do you have statistics? Unfortunately, I may not claim to have statistics since 1990, but from the time of our establishment, we have all the statistics of the accidents that have happened and the lives that have been lost. However, our mandate does not extend to following up whether compensation has been given or not. We don't extend to that, because if you caused an accident, it is a criminal offense. So we will be witnesses on the criminal side. So the other is outside our realm. The next question, I didn't pick the name, from the gentleman from NBS, Ramson. Yes. Ramson asked if I would categorically state how many buildings meet standards in Kampala. I would, of course, now use the same opportunity to inform you that we are doing a baseline study that is supposed to specifically identify that. As I said, we use science to arrive at what we tell you. So we are going through the process with UBOS to be able to categorically tell you that in Kampala, this is the level of compliance with those buildings down there. Assessment of standards for unconventional methods, assessment standards for unconventional methods, technologies, and materials. As I said, we are going to have a regulation that governs that. What do we do? How do you come in? How do you get out? And what do you get out with? So that's going to be governed in a regulation. Is there any question I haven't answered? Okay, I've been reminded in the same spirit that in our effort to ensure that we go away from being reactive, we are also taking we shall be launching a project on Thursday next week. And this project, we are terming it Scientific Evidence for Disaster Risk Assessment or Modeling, whatever you'd want to call it, for engineering practice, regulatory norms, and stakeholder education. We want to look at all the natural disasters that our buildings are exposed to, all the man-made disasters that we have done ourselves, like someone talked about flooding. We want to look at all this and say this is where we are. These are the natural disasters that we are faced with. These are the artificial disasters that we are faced with. In the artificial disasters, we are thinking about fires. We all know that is still one of our major issues right now. We are looking at fires, we are looking at earthquakes, we are looking at flooding and mudslides. This is what most of our buildings are faced with. So we want to look at them and find a proactive way of resolving them, of regulating around them, of ensuring our standards actually take care of them, so that even with a flood, my building should not go down. Even with a mudslide, I should still remain intact. So we are getting off the tables and waiting for a problem. We are getting into looking for solutions scientifically. Look at what can happen, and therefore how do we prepare ourselves for it, so that we have a resilient citizenry. We have people who can actually live their lives with or without these natural and artificial disasters. Thank you.
Thank you.